Welcome back to the Pitchside Podcast channel, and after we covered the worst and also the best players in 2020, it's only fair so we do the same for the clubs. Unfortunately, we have to get the worst out of the way first, but I promise you're gonna get the positive stuff very soon. Once again, this list is based on the standards of these clubs, aside from the number one pick, which has a pretty bad 2020 regardless. Without further ado, let's get into these miserable lists of 5 teams who had a horrible 2020 over and done with. Just brace yourselves for the gloom coming your way. Number 5, Juventus. Kicking off the list of 5 teams that had a horrible 2020, we start with the Scudetto winners, Juventus. You might ask yourself, but why they are here on this list? They are the Italian champions after all. Simply, they were quite average at the very best in that campaign, pretty much lucking their way through winning the title because of the other club's inconsistency. Comparatively to other seasons where they seem like they win the title by dominance and in sometimes undefeated, they felt constantly in danger in the last 12 months of losing their Scudetto title, only for the likes of Atalanta, Lazio and more specifically Inter to fall over themselves in the final hurdle and give them the title on a platter. A lack of a proper style, a confusing tactical plan by Maurizio Sarri, now former manager of Juventus, were the main characteristics of the season and of 2020 as a whole. Underwhelming in every possible regard, losing the cup and being eliminated by Olympique Lyonnais in the Champions League round of 16, Juventus were actively declining each week as the season progressed post-restart. By the end of the season and of 2020 as a whole, Juventus felt like the worst version of that club since 2012. Plus, this was the year in which Paulo Dybala's stock fell massively at the club as he was linked with the likes of Tottenham, Manchester United and even Arsenal. All in all, it wasn't exactly the best year in a while for the old lady. Number 4, Manchester City. Remember the standards factor that defines this list? Well, it comes really handy for this specific entry. Pep Guardiola had some brilliant times domestically in England with Manchester City. He won everything there is to win, and sometimes he ran away with those trophies. However, just like the previous entry, they are judged by their Champions League achievements. Yet, like Juventus before them, they were eliminated by Olympique Lyonnais in the quarter-final of the Champions League, and Guardiola had to cope with another bottle job in Europe for the 4th season in a row, well, at least with Manchester City. Unlike Juventus though, they didn't keep their domestic ace position, at least apparently. In fact, you could argue that for a large portion of the season, they fell behind Leicester City in the pecking order, only winning the Carabao Cup. Finishing this season in second but 23 points behind Liverpool doesn't exactly scream domination and standards of a high club. For all the spending, the hype and the brilliant football they mostly play, it was as underwhelming of a year as ever for them. Maybe buying another set of fullbacks would help Manchester City grow a little bit older in 2021. Number 3, Olympique de Marseille. As the only team to win a Champions League in France, Olympique de Marseille still holds some serious value in European folklore. However, 2020 has not been kind to them for multiple reasons. The constant gap between them and PSG has only widened as of late, despite getting the odd win here and there against them in the league. The difference between 2020 and other years for Olympique de Marseille, though, is their disappearance from the European fold. I know they've just been ousted of the Champions League group stage as of late, and that's exactly the point. For all of their decent effort in Ligue 1, they still lag behind in terms of the European presence in the Champions League or the Europa League. For a side that was just in the final of that competition 2 years ago, this is simply unacceptable. You can add to that a constant on and off attempt at financial takeover at the club that did not materialise a la Newcastle United style, and you would almost feel sorry for a side that really sets themselves apart historically from the other French clubs. How the mighty have fallen in the French league. Number 2, Barcelona. There's only fewer teams than the title 5 teams that had a horrible 2020. This kind of list only suits like Barcelona. The 8-2 result against Bayern Munich in the Champions League is the defining moment in their year 2020. In that, everything before it was alarming already, and everything afterwards was a mess. Barcelona's 2020 was a continuation of their slow yet noticeable decline for a while. They started the year under a new coach that literally was brought from his farm to coach a club like Barcelona. Quique Setién was very clueless, tactically inept and too powerless to be a head coach for that ilk of club. His weak character meant that things were really messy, no pun intended, as the board started to fall out with Lionel Messi. The results were unconvincing, with Barcelona failing to win any kind of trophy and playing some of the most lifeless football since the heydays of tiki-taka. And then the A2 happens. The signs were on the wall that Barcelona would not make it very far in the Champions League. Everybody expected them to lose against Bayern, but not in that way. It was so horrendous to see someone like Lionel Messi being helpless on the pitch. The aftermath of that resulted in Lionel Messi versus the board saga that set throughout the whole summer transfer that is frankly worthy of a multi-season Netflix series. The constant legal tug-of-war between the two parts meant that Lionel Messi eventually was quote-unquote convinced to stay at Barcelona, and all Barcelona did was get a grumpier captain. The comment of Ronald Koeman didn't exactly help the situation around, as he kicked Suarez out of the club, and some of his tactics are still baffling to this day. Moreover, there is a financial dark cloud looming over the club as they head into the next election, which is not a good sign at all. Number 1. Schalke 04. Well, it is time to round up this list of the 5 teams that had a horrible 2020, and this is just a sad entry altogether. Objectively, Schalke 04 were the biggest side in Europe's elite football to be hit by the effects of the year 2020. Conversely though, they started the year in a much better position than where they are now. In January they were in a touching distance from Champions League places. Now, to be fair, they started declining already before the pandemic kicked off, but the Royal Blues didn't exactly help themselves before they started football by any means necessary. Yet when football returned, Schalke just picked up their bad form from where they left it instead of digging back up again. Winless in 29 as I'm saying these words, the Roar outfit are in a serious threat of relegation after being stalwarts of the Bundesliga for decades long. Their performances are just as lifeless as empty stadiums, and sometimes it feels like they're not even resisting any dropping that comes their way. And of course, there was the major financial issues that accompanied that. The club's actions to terminate some contracts for staff and players as they looked starving for cash reflected on the whole mood of the club. There were a good number of teams in 2020 that had a horrible year, but Schalke 04 are definitely top of this list. Here's to hope that they pick themselves back up again in 2021 and avoid the worst possible fate that they could have, and we don't end up having another Palermo in our hands. If you feel like debating this list, like, comment on the video, share it and subscribe, most importantly to the channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates on this kind of lists and other content on here. Follow us on social media at SidePSP on Twitter and on Instagram at PitchSupport. You can find this article in written form at www.webreadsports.com, and make sure you listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcast, or wherever you can get it from. I was your boy, the HOD of the PSP, and until the next time, goodbye.